So there's a really good example you could take with anything that happens in the gun industry or the gun culture, or it's like, oh, well, that guy got hit. And so everyone just like leaves him alone for a while. Oh, he'll figure it out. And what I'm saying is that I think you're identifying that in many ways the left circles the wagons. Mm-hmm. And they protect their own. Yeah. And there's a lot of things that you can go through real quickly, so I'll just launch them one at a time. It was Zuby who said, calling someone a hypocrite only matters if they have integrity. Yep. I'm paraphrasing him poorly, but like, okay, we know that doesn't work. Oh. The SPLC is not an honest organization. Oh. Okay, we know that, so then they're not credible. We don't use them because they're credible, but somebody else will because it's advantageous. Right. Do you fight fire with fire? Sometimes. However, what I think a more critical condition is, why does the Conservative Party not use the Department of Justice to actually do justice? And I don't mean this in the actually mentality, right. But it's, you look at all these criticisms across the 529 issue, you look at, or the 529 insurrection, you look at the things that happened in Minneapolis, the things that happened in Kenosha, it's, why don't you actually just, I don't know, maybe do your job?
Right. So
and because if you're not doing justice, you're not the Department of Justice. And if you're not doing justice as the Department of Justice, you should find a new job. Mm-hmm. You should be removed. And I do not think you win in the game of attrition with people who are already committed to a zealous ideology that will never stop.
Maybe abolishing these corrupted institutions might be something better instead of them being weaponized against the political parties. Because when another political party goes into power, they're going to be using the same tools that they use on the other party.
Well, here, perfect example would be, what was her name? The gal from the View who said that gun laws in America would change if Joy Behar, right? If black people had them, right? Okay, do you censor her? Do you cut her from the film, or do you cut her from? No, you ignore her. So she's not a serious speaker, and as that continues, you encourage over the long tail decision to build your community, to build your friends, to focus. If you want to defeat ignorant people, you isolate them from the halls of intelligence.
She wasn't wrong, though, Joy Behar. What she's saying, she's not talking about conservatives. So Joy Behar on The View says that when black people get guns, the gun laws will change. Now, we, as people who don't like racism or who like guns, we hear that and we're like, that's ridiculous. Like, we would ever support that race. No. It's these uppity liberals, of course, want more gun control, and especially if minorities they don't like are getting them.
Look what happened with the Black Panthers.
Exactly. That was California. That was San Francisco.
Absolutely.
It was California and San Francisco in a different time. I don't want to go down that road too far. What I do want to go down to is the point of white fragility. What did we learn from the book White Fragility? The author is a terrible person, and she wants to project that on everybody else.
Yep. And she's racist.
She's a racist who wants to project her racism on everybody else. Mm-hmm. An honest academic would look at that and say,
Forrest, we need to have an honest a conversation about this. I see people on the right internalize what Joy Behar said. And when you internalize that pain, you assume they're talking about you when they're actually talking about themselves. So when they project, when they say these things, I just always assume they're talking about themselves. You know why? People have a have their worldview, and they assume, I should say low IQ people assume everyone else must see the world the same way they do. Therefore, if they don't agree with me, it's because they're lying. So someone like Joy Behar, when she says that, she's actually talking more about herself and what she feels than what anyone else actually thinks.
I don't think she has a low IQ. I think she's just mean. I think it's fueled from spite. It's just rage. But why would you say that about anybody? Why would you say that about anybody? Is that the sole thing that motivates them is racism?
Because she's a racist.
Exactly. So she needs to spend some time figuring out about who she is.
She sees the world through this lens and assumes that's why people would do something. Mm-hmm. She does not understand the fact that, we're all, I don't know, are you familiar with Maj Touré?
Yes.
Yeah, we're fans of Black Guns Matter and Maj Touré and the work he does. And it's like she doesn't even know he exists. I mean, literally, she probably doesn't.
I think that
she sees this world. Then she says, everyone else must think the same way as me, but I'm a good person because I don't act on it. We're all like, no, we don't think that. We think you're a racist.
This is just a modernized version of white man's burden. That's all this is. It's hard for me to be this good white person You know, it's my burden to have to go around and say this stuff. I'm just trying to speak sense to you folks.
Are you talking about like the 1800s white man's burden?
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
The part where like we have things like travel and medicine and written language, we should spread that around the world.
Yeah, but they've taken that and just injected it into everything.
Yeah, they call it white savior complex.
Right.
Yeah,
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. They think they know better for you. That's the whole idea.
Remember that guy in California where he was cheering on the rioting? And then he's like, you see his Twitter thread where he's like, yes, do it, yeah. Wait a minute, why are you coming to my neighborhood? Don't come to my neighborhood, go downtown. And it's like, didn't he actually say like go downtown where the poor people lived? And he was mad they're going to Beverly Hills. I'm like, bro, they're coming to eat the rich. You're not safe.
They've been saying this for a while.
I mean, they don't say eat the rich because they're hungry. They say eat the rich because they're greedy.
Yeah.
No, exactly.
I'm still working this idea out. I
Sure.
don't claim to know the answer here. I don't know the solutions, but I think maybe it would be more advantageous to stop relying on corrupted institutions to do the right thing. And I think moving away from them, defunding them, abolishing them, I think would be a better strategy than saying, hey, Bill Barr, Mr. CIA, do the right thing here. I think it would be better to you know, I don't know. Some people say play fire with fire, and I understand that argument, and I understand where you guys are coming from. But my knee-jerk reaction is like, wait, what we're doing here is we're adding more fuel to the fire, and it's already very hot in this room.
Well, but
that's my point of view.
So I think you're...
And I might be wrong,
Oh, you might be, and let me tell you why. I think you're seizing a lot on the argument of state intervention, and just setting that aside for a moment, because I don't even know, I don't think we agree entirely there, but when he mentioned something like having our own version of the SPLC. Obviously, we're not saying we should have an organization that lies, but the point is the left has re-engineered the culture such that being accused of having any kind of conservative value comes with a very swift and significant social cost.
But they target, attack, and harass individuals.
And I think that it is a very good idea for conservatives to push for a culture where there is a social cost to being a communist.
Right.
If you are going to go out there and say, I support the ideology which has resulted in hundreds of millions of innocent people being slaughtered, folks should probably not want to associate with you.
If you want to advocate for the abolition of private property, start with yourself. If you're not willing to do that, you don't believe it. But that is an old tale. What you're dealing with is an asymmetry of ideas, an asymmetry in the side of warfare. You look at after nuclear weapons were created, the idea of warfare had to change. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. After the machine gun, horse charges didn't matter anymore. After bomber planes, large formations of people don't work anymore.
Standard armor didn't matter when gunpowder became ubiquitous.
It took time, but eventually gunpowder defeated armor. And
then armor became massive tanks,
which then right now we have drones. You having a tank battalion is functionally useless against a powerful Western military. What happened after this history lesson? We saw not history. I don't need to talk down. That's not the right way of saying it. But after World War II, what were the next major conflicts? Korea. My grandfather was a POW for 3 years, so I heard a lot of stories. And then, so there was that. And then there was Vietnam, and you saw the rise of insurgency warfare. Insurgency has become such a buzzword amongst the military elite that it's like, I'm cool. I said insurgency, metaphysics, polymath, banana peel, but whatever. So the point being said, though, is how does an asymmetry work? The left has functionally and fully adopted asymmetrical warfare from the side of what we had called terrorism, but an insurgency. It is a situation where I get to harm you, but if you do what I do to you, if you reciprocate, that's bad. So you see this within the conflict, the riots in Minneapolis. The riots were a really good example. The Antifa or the rioters will provoke a response and use that response as justification for further evidence of their need for revolution. Who's been calling for a revolution this entire time? It hasn't been the right.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, look.
But understanding insurgency conflict, how to fight against a counterinsurgency. The purpose of an insurgency is not to defeat you in a military battle; it's to break your will to the system. How do Americans how does the right, or how do Americans defeat this social contagion that is this insurgency, which is both bred on our soil and abroad? is you remember the foundations that built our country. It's almost the Lord of the Rings plot all over again. You have to understand who you are and where you come from, and then live up to those virtues.
That is very important that you mentioned that, because one of the huge problems right now is that conservatives, but I would say Americans overall, and people living in Western societies have no idea what their values are or what values upon which their society has been founded. And so when the left comes along and they try to deconstruct, a lot of people are completely helpless. They don't know how to defend and justify the values that our society promotes. They're incapable of doing it.
I think
you're right that we need to know what we believe, and we don't.
Yeah, I think this is where we kind of differ, because I don't see the left as the main problem here. I see a divide and conquer agenda. I see voting for the lesser of two evils that is continuing to plague this country. I see a duopoly. I see fifth generational warfare being raged on the American people. And I think the people that are in power are using the left right now because they're the most easily to get used now. They're the most easily to push this agenda through because it's convenient now. But as soon as it becomes inconvenient for the larger agenda, for the larger fifth generational warfare enslavement of humanity, they're going to be using a right-wing element of it that's also going to be pushing on a different front that's going to be taking away our rights and our economic abilities to survive and prosper.
So hold on. I just want to make a point.
Sorry.
I just want to say this one thing, and then I'll let you jump in. So more than one thing can be true at a time. It can absolutely be the case that the ruling elite see the left as convenient revolutionaries to destroy the existing social order and then bring to fruition whatever it is that they're seeking to transform our society into. It is also the case that the strategy by which they do that is to have the left completely erode any and all moral surrounding family values, destroy the family, and then the government comes into that vacuum and usurps the responsibility that the family normally has.
And they do this with the participation of the right wing.
But what we have to do, I totally agree with you on that, but that's part of why we do have to fight left-wing ideology and defend and fight for the family. So I don't think it's enough to say the left is being used by these tyrants, therefore we just look at the tyrants. We actually have to fight the ideology itself because it's useful to them for a reason.
So my opinion is, I think we're in such a desperate situation. We should be fighting against the enslavement, the evisceration of our rights, and the destruction of our financial futures. Whether you're on the left, right, or center, I think it's time more than ever to let go of these kind of differences and say, hey, we're actually being really hurt here. We're actually being really screwed over here. And unless we come together, unless we realize that we're all in this boat together, we're all going down as a sinking ship.
So, I don't want the people who groom children by boat.
Look, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think you understand the deep ideological divide in the United States from left and right. You have people who have no moral framework. They will say simultaneously stop and frisk is bad and red flag laws are good, even though they're variants of the exact same thing and one's even worse. Red flag laws, stop and frisk on steroids, they're for it. Why? No moral framework. So when you go to them and say, hey, we need to come together because all these bad things are happening, they'll go, oh, you're right, of course. And then as soon as you turn around, they'll hit you in the back.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a good strategy. I'm not saying it's even going
not
to work.
Well, no, it doesn't work. Okay, well, it's Isaiah 5:20. They will call good evil and evil good. You cannot break bread and have commonality with somebody who calls what you call good evil. So, problem that you have, do we focus on the left? Do we focus on the globalists? Do we focus on all these things? You know what? They all solve the point that you're saying, they solve the same question.
But
you can't just advocate for the family. You have to have one. Forrest, you have to build.
Forrest, I'm gonna agree with Luke on this one. I think if we just compromise with the child drag shows, then maybe
No. That's not what I'm saying.
Luke,
not what I said.
Do you think they're in the same boat as us? Because you're saying we're in the same boat together.
I see the right-wing political establishment willingly going along with this and pretending like they're going to be helping us when they're not. That's what I see.
I think there's
that too.
I think there's a divide, first of all, of our understanding of right wing and like Republicans, right? The Republicans in DC and then the Republicans across the nation are two totally different things, right? For example, you're talking about why didn't the FBI or the CIA move on 529? Right?
Insurrection.
The insurrection. Who was the president at the time? Donald Trump. That was his FBI. That was his CIA. Why didn't they move? Right? And then you're definitely not going to get a move out of a Biden FBI or DOJ. The problem is so entrenched in DC, right? The FBI is a bunch of it used to be a Republican stronghold, but Republicans of DC, right? Your James Comeys of the world, Bill Barr, Robert Mueller, right? This is the uniparty, right? There is one belief in the DC realm, right? When you're outside, in West Virginia, New York, or whatever, and it's left versus right, Democrat versus Republican. But once you get to DC, once you win that battle and you get to DC, the fight becomes the incumbents versus everybody else. Yeah. So the problem you have is that when you try to abolish the FBI or you try to abolish these corrupt
just limit
institutions,
their power.
I'm with you on that, right? But first you have to get in the guys who believe that into those positions, because you can't abolish that institution while you have James Comey or a Bill Barr or Robert Mueller there. In fact, I wanted to the whole Mueller investigation, and that James Comey gets fired, then the special counsel gets appointed and Robert Mueller gets selected as a special counsel. If a couple of things were adjusted slightly differently, what you would have actually had end up is that there's a universe somewhere out there where Bill Barr would have been selected the special counsel, and then Donald Trump would have hired Robert Mueller to head the FBI. You're dealing with the same pool of talent no matter what, right? That's the problem. The pool of talent you could draw on to put into the institutions. And so then it goes back to what you're saying. Build the family, build the community, right? Because first you have to build the community, then you go and take the halls of power, and then you put the community in that hall of power, and then you do what you want. That's the problem.
But just for the record, I don't stand by any groomers. I don't think you should be working or aligning with any type of people who are hurting children in unspeakable ways. But the one point I want to make here is that it's both Republicans and Democrats that are going to Jeffrey Epstein's island.
I need to address that point you're making, because when you say you go to them and say we're being really hurt by this, you're talking about people who overtly and with pride to clarify, support those people.
I'm saying absolutely not. You cannot support people who hurt small children, especially with how evil they're doing it, especially with the damages that they're causing them.
So
what I'm saying is that the conversation should be. What I'm saying is the conversation should be a little bit more nuanced rather than generalized. That's just the perspective that I'm trying to input here.
So here's what I would recommend. Go to someone you see as a Democrat voter or someone who's perceived as a left and say, do you agree with sex changes for children? Do you agree with child drag shows? If they say no, be like, okay, let's have a conversation. If they say yes, which 95% probably will, maybe 85%, then you can be like, okay, have a nice day.
What you're asking about, Tim, is the same thing that comes into the gun control conversation. When was the last time you had an honest conversation about this? About gun control as a whole? Like, okay, I was politically introduced into the gun control conversation. What conversation? Okay, that's such a...
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.